Hi, I'm Wyatt Cash with Scoop News Group, and we're excited to be here today talking to Derek Manky, Chief for Security Insights and Global Threat Alliances at Fortinet's FortiGuard Labs. Derek, thank you so much for joining us today.
Wyatt, it's a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Well, I think you'd agree 2021 is unfolding as a year of significant transition as enterprises and employees adapt to the emerging work from anywhere environment. And at the same time, we're also seeing a new and more visible level of cyber attacks. So let me start by asking, what's behind the dramatic surge in ransomware and cyber attacks that have been making such big headlines in recent weeks?
Yeah, great question. So this is definitely a trend that we've seen over the last year. If we look at ransomware in general as technology when it came out and really a strategy for attackers, it was back in about 2010. Wyatt, it really started becoming prevalent back then. It was a problem, but nowhere near the level of the problem it is now. And what we're seeing, unfortunately, in the headlines is that the targets are very targeted in nature. These are deep pockets, large enterprise, critical infrastructure, public sector, that cyber criminals, not nation state and APT, so like what we call APT, advanced persistent threats, which is typically a different bucket of attacks. We're seeing the monetization world of cyber criminals hit these high profile targets, and that's the trend we're seeing. They have full funding obviously on their side. The profitability is massive when it comes to cybercrime, and they're very strategic about this now. It's not the mass emails of time in the past. So we're seeing the cyber criminals now being very bold, brazen, directly contacting their victims, getting into negotiation phases, demanding seven-figure payments of ransom. And one of the big differences now compared to 10 years ago is the way that they're moving funds. They're using cryptocurrency platforms to move funds, which is much different to years past. And unfortunately, the trend we're seeing is that there's multiple players in the game now. It's not just one or two operations. That was the case 10 years ago. We're seeing on our radar at FortiGuard Labs 15 plus different ransomware gangs at large.
Well, how would you characterize the broader state of cyber threats today? And can you briefly describe some of these new methods of attacks that enterprises should be on alert for?
Absolutely. So it's the convergence of technology now. And we talked about the work from anywhere environment. That's part of this. You have more endpoints. The attack surface, as we call it, has expanded tremendously. And that means a lot more doorways that are inherently open to attackers. And they're capitalizing on this. And so if we look at the broader state of cybersecurity, it's not a shift, it's an expansion. You still have all of the problems that we've been dealing with for decades, email-based threats and phishing and social engineering. That still happens. But as I said, now you also have that going to high-level C-level executive targets. We call this spear phishing and whaling, going after C-level executives, which are in turn used for business email compromise. That's one of the largest attacks we see out there today, where a CFO mail credentials are compromised, and they use that to actually do payment diversion fraud, changing bank routing codes and the payment of invoices as an example. That's one new thing that we've seen over the last 2 to 3 years. But now we're also seeing those attacks play on ransomware. We're seeing cyber criminals get to those targets by different vehicles. So social media platforms are a big aspect of that we've seen recently, is where cyber criminals are compromising social media accounts to talk to other employees at organizations and work their way into organizations, or use information that is posted publicly for reconnaissance that can be crafted into very effective social engineering attacks. And so, if we look at that broader state, the level of sophistication has really risen for cybercrime. We've always known that the level of sophistication has been there for, again, cyber terrorism and the nation state sponsored attacks. But now that this is also ringing true for cybercrime, which is a big problem.
Indeed. Well, how would you say the emerging nature of working from anywhere on any device is compounding the ability for enterprises to really mitigate some of these new threat vectors?
Yeah, so it's compounding because it's you've had this traditional, corporate office mentality where you have all the devices in one network, logical network within a corporation, within a physical building. As an example, you have the concept of perimeter security, on-site security, which doesn't apply when you take those corporate laptops and employee laptops outside into the office, into the hotel, into hopefully not, but a coffee shop or something like this. And that's the problem, right? It's about, the challenge is visibility and control. And the other challenge is when you get off of these logical networks into these, let's call them external networks, extraneous networks. You don't know what the state of security is on those networks when you plug into them. And the other thing that we're seeing at FortiGuard Labs is one of the largest low-hanging fruit problems we see out there is that attackers are going after IoT devices, these plug-and-play devices such as printers and scanners and IP security cameras, gaming devices, all these things that can be purchased from big box stores that are put onto the same logical network. And that is a big problem, Wyatt, because we're seeing attackers go after these fresh vulnerabilities, software security flaws that often don't have solution for months, if not years. And so going back to that attack surface problem, the attack surface is actually more porous now. There's more holes in it because we're not just talking about one or two problems. In fact, NIST and the MVD, the National Vulnerability Database, they tracked almost 20,000 new security holes a year. And a lot of those are related to these devices that are plugged into those networks. So a lot of people ask, why would you attack my printer? There's nothing valuable there. The case is they use these to springboard. They get into those devices and they use that to laterally move into the target, which is often a corporate laptop.
Lastly, given the practical challenges that most enterprises, really still face in trying to fully modernize their overall IT operations, what security recommendations would you offer to help them move more quickly or effectively?
Great question. So first of all, I always like to get back to the basics, right? If we look at the inherent problem of how those vehicles, the way cyber criminals are hitting their targets, whether it's business email compromise or ransomware, they're using things such as exploiting the human mind. This is social engineering. And it comes back to those social media platforms I was talking about. Really having a zero trust mentality is important, right? Down to the human level. So education is very key when it comes to if someone from your IT department is verifying that they are who they say they are, having this mentality and that education just in terms of all these different clever techniques that cyber criminals are trying to approach their victims and infect them is very important. We talk about these basics all the time, inspecting links before you click on them, before opening malicious attachments, but also being aware of who is contacting you, even on social media platforms, doing things like multi-factor authentication, identity management, and ZTNA, zero trust network access, is very important. That's a new technology that absolutely applies to work from anywhere environments. Making sure you only have those secure devices and secure applications from wherever you're connecting from the world is really important. We also, training is very important as well. We have, FortiGuard Labs, NSE level certifications. There's free information and security awareness training. And finally, my last point would be going back to that porous attack surface, the vulnerabilities. Keep making sure that on your core critical networks that you only have trusted devices, that you have them patched, you have them up to date, because without that, it's inviting open door to cyber criminals.
Absolutely. Well, Derek Manky, thank you so much for joining us and sharing your insights today. And I want to thank our audience at CyberScoop for tuning in as well. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks so much.